Ever get that sinking feeling? Like halfway through a project, you realize you and your teammate, you're on totally different wavelengths.
Happens all the time. And it's easy to think, oh, it's just a little misunderstanding. But those little things, they can really add up. Wasted time, money, even damaged relationships.
Oh, tell me about it. Once spent weeks, weeks, designing this whole website redesign.
Yeah.
Turns out, the client, they had something totally different in mind. Back to square one.
Oof, I feel that. Makes you realize how important it is to tackle those misunderstandings head on. Which is perfect, because today we're diving deep into that.
We've got this source material. It's called Building Shared Understanding. Kind of catchy, right?
Straight to the point. I like it.
And it's not just some vague advice either. It lays out this whole framework, a roadmap, you could say, for navigating those misunderstandings.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it all starts with something that, honestly, a lot of people skip right over. Figuring out the root cause.
It seems obvious when you say it like that.
Right. But we get so caught up in putting out fires, we forget to ask, wait, how'd this fire even start?
It's like going to the doctor with a cough. They're not just going to hand you cough drops, right? They're going to figure out if it's a cold, allergies, something else entirely.
Exactly. You got to diagnose before you can treat. And that's where this tool comes in. It's called the 5 Whys technique.
The 5 Whys. Okay, tell me more about that.
It's deceptively simple, but so effective.
Yeah.
Basically, you channel your inner 5-year-old. Keep asking why until you get to the bottom of things.
So not just, oh, we missed the deadline. It's, why'd we miss the deadline?
And then, why wasn't that thing ready? And on until you hit that root cause.
It's like a misunderstanding detective.
100%.
Oh.
And the source material, it actually gives us some clues to look for. Things like, was the communication unclear? Were expectations misaligned? Or, and this one's huge.
Yeah, I'm already cringing.
Cultural differences, those can really throw a wrench in the works.
Oh, big time. Have you ever had like a major project go sideways because of cultural differences? You know, like one of those, oh, now I get it moments?
Oh, absolutely. Years ago, I was working on this project team in Japan, and we were constantly bumping heads about deadlines.
Oh, no, I can see where this is going.
We thought they were always late. They thought we were always rushing them. Tension was high.
So how'd you bridge that gap?
Well, it turned out that their culture, really big on consensus, making sure every detail is perfect. So what we saw as a final deadline to them, it was more like the starting point for discussion, refining things further.
Whoa, talk about a different perspective.
Right. It was a huge lesson. We realized we had to adjust how we communicated, be super clear about our expectations, and build in way more time for talking things through.
That's fascinating. Really underscores how those cultural nuances can make or break a project.
No doubt. And it ties right into what the source material talks about next, getting everyone on the same page right from the get-go.
Love that. Because sometimes it's the folks who seem, on the periphery of the project.
Right.
They're the ones who have those aha moments. Like that saying, none of us is as smart as all of us.
So true. Everyone brings something unique to the table.
Okay, so let's say we've had this open conversation. Everyone's shared their piece. Now what?
That's the thing, right? It's not enough to just talk.
Right. We can't just pat ourselves on the back, say, good talk, team, and expect everything to magically work itself out.
Exactly. Talking's great, but...
It's like that game Telephone, right? Whisper something down the line, by the time it gets to the end, totally different message.
And that's why the source stresses this. You need action.
Action. I like it. So what kind of action are we talking about?
Well, for starters, you got to document everything. Clearly. Thoroughly.
Like, here's what we talked about, here's what we decided, and here are the specific next steps. No room for, oh, I thought it meant this.
Exactly. It's got to be crystal clear.
And it's not a one and done thing either, right?
Yeah. Good point. This document, it's got to be a living thing. As the project changes, the documentation changes too.
Love it. So it's not enough to just write it down. We got to write it down well and keep it up to date.
Exactly. Which brings us to a concept I think is absolutely brilliant. This idea of becoming misunderstanding detectives.
Proactive rather than reactive. Tell me more. I love it.
It's about saying, okay, we know misunderstandings happen. How do we get ahead of them?
Yeah.
Instead of just reacting after the fact.
So instead of waiting for the fire to start, we're walking around with a fire extinguisher, spotting potential hazards.
Exactly. And the source material, it gives us some tactics. Like one thing it talks about, scrutinizing all the project documents.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Like, are there any terms that are kind of vague?
Yeah.
Instructions that could be read in a couple of different ways?
So easy to just breeze over those, especially when you're in the thick of it. But then those tiny things, they blow up later.
Exactly. A stitch in time saves 9. Right. And the source material also talks about this, and it emphasizes how important those regular check-ins are throughout the entire project, not just at the end.
Totally. And I don't just mean those formal progress reports either. Sometimes it's those quick chats,
Right, right.
Like even just grabbing coffee with a teammate. Those can be so revealing.
Because sometimes people are hesitant to speak up in a bigger group, or they don't even realize they've got a different understanding till they have a chance to bounce ideas around.
It's like you don't even know what questions to ask until you're in the middle of a conversation and something clicks. You're like, wait a minute.
Exactly. Those casual check-ins, they can unearth those hidden worries, assumptions, before they become big problems.
It's like checking the oil in your car. A small thing that prevents a major headache later. Speaking of learning from those little mistakes, those little misunderstandings.
Yeah.
The source material also talks about this, analyzing past misunderstandings.
Oh, that's huge. Because if you keep seeing the same issues pop up over and over, that's telling you something.
Right, like there's this deeper issue, systemic.
Exactly.
And you got to adjust. Like if a certain type of miscommunication keeps happening, maybe it's time to rethink how you're communicating that information in the first place.
100%. It's all about learning, getting better as you go.
This has been so eye-opening. We've gone from misunderstandings, those are the worst, to like, okay, we got this. We have a plan.
Right. It's empowering.
And you know what's great? These strategies, they're not just for these big, hairy projects. Any relationship, any time clear communication is important. This applies.
Work, family, even just ordering coffee.
Ordering coffee.
You ever get the wrong order? Misunderstanding?
Okay, you got me there.
Right. It's about getting on the same page.
So true. Okay, but now I'm thinking, what are some of those subtle ways we might be contributing to misunderstandings without even realizing it?
Ooh, that's a good one. And honestly, that's something we could all stand to think about a little more.
Right. Like, is it our communication style? Are we being too vague? Do we make assumptions without even thinking about it?
It's easy to do. Being aware of those blind spots, that's key.
Becoming a misunderstanding detective in our own lives. I love that.
Exactly. And this isn't about beating yourself up over past mistakes. It's about learning, growing.
This deep dive has been awesome. We've gotten so much out of it.
Right. It's not about if misunderstandings happen, it's about when they happen.
Yeah.
How are we prepared to deal with them?
Beautifully said. We've covered so much ground already, but before we wrap up, I had a question.
Shoot.
Does the source material talk about what to do when misunderstandings still happen? Like even when you're doing everything right?
It does. And it emphasizes one thing that's so important, assuming good intent.
Okay.
Because it's easy to think the worst when something goes wrong. Like, oh, they're trying to be difficult, or they don't even care about this.
Right.
But usually there's a good explanation if you're willing to look for it.
Like that saying, right? Be kind. Everyone is fighting a hard battle. You never really know what someone else is dealing with.
Exactly. And sometimes just being understanding can completely change things.
So true. The source material also says that to really deal with a misunderstanding, you got to be clear, calm, and understanding when you communicate.
Definitely.
So no storming into someone's office, waving your arms like, why didn't you answer my email?
Probably not the best strategy.
Yeah.
Instead, the source material says you should start by acknowledging the misunderstanding. Then try to see things from their perspective.
Asking questions, really listening, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where that misunderstanding detective thing comes in handy again. Instead of placing blame, be curious.
Like, hey, I noticed this doesn't seem quite right. Can you walk me through how we got here?
Exactly. You're working together, not against each other. The goal is to find a solution that works for everybody.
And sometimes that means being willing to compromise or even admitting when you're wrong.
Definitely.
It's like that quote, a person who never made a mistake, never tried anything new. We're all human.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to mess up sometimes. The important thing is to learn from it.
This whole deep dive has been amazing. We came in thinking misunderstandings were like these roadblocks you can't avoid.
Yeah.
And now we have this toolkit for how to prevent them, how to deal with them, even use them to make our relationship stronger.
It's a whole different mindset, you know. Misunderstandings aren't the end of the world. They're chances to learn, to grow, to connect better.
I love that this has been so valuable. What about you, listener? What are your experiences with misunderstandings? How can you use what we talked about today to handle them better in your own life?
Remember, building shared understanding is a journey. It's not always easy, but it's so worth it.
So true. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. See you next time.